Hello and welcome back to another great edition of VU Sports Wired. Cutler Klein here, Max Schneider, Drew Sundaram, as always. Two very stressed out Yankees fans and one incredibly sad Giants fan. Thank you so much as always for tuning in. We have got a great show for you today. We're talking all things Vanderbilt football and starting to get into a little bit of basketball talk, guys. The season approaching. But first, we've got your highlights from the last 2 weeks of Commodore football in this bye week. First, the game against Georgia at home, homecoming weekend, the number 5 team coming to town. Let's roll the highlights. Bulldogs coming to town, one of the top-ranked teams in the country, one of the best rushing games in the country as well. This team is dangerous on the ground, and they show it right here, first quarter. There goes Nick Chubb, burning defenders, saying, "Get off me," to the house, 33 yards for Chubb, make it a 7-0 Georgia lead early in this one, and the Bulldog fans that made the trip from Athens absolutely love it. Later in the quarter, Fromm looking for DeAndre Swift, who just gets over the goal line. They had to take a look at that one to make sure that he was in there. 14-0 to pick it up, 21-0 Georgia, and Ralph Webb late in the first half barrels over the line to get into the end zone. Vanderbilt on the board, which is more than Tennessee could say about their game against Georgia the previous week. Then in the second half, Georgia can throw the ball too. There's Fromm deep to Sonny Michel into the end zone. Or rather, that's not Sonny Michel, that's Terry Godwin picking that one up into the end zone. 47 yards for the touchdown. And there goes Sonny Michel, burning not a couple defenders there and just using that game-breaking speed, getting to the house. 50 yards over the pylon. Georgia putting the hurting on the Commodores in their own building. Tough to see there. And then in the fourth quarter, there goes Elijah Holyfield, the son of the notorious boxer, getting over to make it 45-7. Vanderbilt late in the game picking up one more here. That's a slant route to C.J. Duncan right into the end zone. Vanderbilt put up 14 points against the number 5 team in the country, which, I mean, considering how badly they played, they're pretty lucky to get 14 points in that one. Final score, 45-14. But, I mean, hey, Georgia's the top team, one of the top 5 teams in the country. There is no way that Vanderbilt could repeat a similar performance against Ole Miss, right? Well, here we go, picking it up in Oxford. Vanderbilt taking on the Rebels, a program that is not bowl eligible this year, no matter what, thanks to Hugh Freeze. Picking it up here in the first quarter, Shea Patterson finding a wide open A.J. Brown, 58 yards, burning all kinds of tacklers there. That play pretty much exemplified Vanderbilt's day on defense. 7-0 Ole Miss. Then on the next drive for Vanderbilt, maybe trying to get the run game going. And it's Ralph Webb finding a hole. Ralph Webb breaking one open for the first time all year. Gets to the goal line, and Vanderbilt ties it up. Ralph Webb making all kinds of plays. Perhaps the running game turning a corner here, despite the woes on the offensive line, which we'll get to in a little bit. Later in the half, Shermer handing off to Webb, who just gets over the goal line, and Vanderbilt's up 14-7, maybe trying to put this game in a stranglehold, and then this happens. Shea Patterson finding a wide open DeMarcus Lodge in the end zone. We'll delve it more into that play in just a little bit. And here's a back-breaking play here, down a touchdown or a tie game right here. Shea Patterson going towards the line, and he just barrels over Trey Herndon into the end zone.
Right, and with this play, you see a lot of the problems that are plaguing this Vanderbilt defense. I mean, first you see the really bad angle taken on the tackle, and next just like the lack of physicality at the point of attack. At the end of the day, that's a quarterback. Shea
Patterson again, late in the second quarter, finding an incredible play there on the wide receiver. Oh my goodness, he goes reverse Tyree on that play, catching the ball against Trey Herndon's helmet. Not a great day for Trey Herndon out there. Couple of plays making the highlight reels for the wrong reasons. Sticking with it, same drive. It's going to be Jordan Wilkins up the middle, burning a couple tackles and into the end zone. The route was on from there for the Rebels, 28-14. Before the quarter's out, Patterson into the corner, finding DeMarcus Lodge, 35-21. Vanderbilt trying to clot any bit of momentum they have in this game, finding Kalijah Lipscomb there. Kyle Shermer Vanderbilt only down by a couple scores during the second half. Maybe with the ball back, they can establish the momentum, and then that happens. Kyle Shermer fumbles. The offensive line just has to fall on it. A safety for Vanderbilt there. Tough break, 37-21, and Ole Miss just continued to pile it on. Shea Patterson, what a throw there to A.J. Brown, 44-21 in favor of the Rebels. Vanderbilt wouldn't be done yet. On the 1-yard line, Shermer, wide open, Jared Pinkney, making it 47-28. Maybe they can start clawing back into it. Yeah, no, that's not exactly what happened here. Instead, it's going to be a 55-yard run here from Eric Swinney. The second running back on the SEC's worst rushing offense does that late in the game. 57-35 would be your final from Oxford. Vanderbilt losing their fourth game in a row, falling to 3-4, headed into this bye week here. This is the SEC's worst rushing offense in Ole Miss, and Vanderbilt gives up 218 yards to that offense. Let me let that sink in for a second here. 218 yards. What's up with that? What is wrong with the run defense here, and why do they continually? I mean, we expected them to not be able to stop the Alabama running game. Perhaps the Florida running game, maybe they could have done a little bit better against them, but then against Georgia, they were going to get barreled over no matter what they did. But against Ole Miss, this was the week that they would be able to redeem themselves, and they still couldn't do it. What happened?
I mean, when you look at this running game, you heard about an E for effort. This is an F for effort from this Vanderbilt defense. I mean, 5 straight weeks now that they've given up more than 200 yards on the ground, this time to the worst rushing offense in the conference. And you've really seen 2 things here. One is missed tackles and lack of effort, and the other one is failure to hold the edge. And you saw it on both long touchdown runs in this game. The first one by Jordan Wilkins, simply barreling through the line of scrimmage, throws a defender off him before the goal line, really just missed tackles, arm tackling, lack of effort at the point of attack like you saw with Trey Herndon on that run by Shea Patterson. I mean, you're going to have to wrap up at a certain point, and I think they're starting to miss Zach Cunningham more and more as these games go on. It was hard to see at the beginning of the season, but really, even going back to last season, this team's had struggles with missed tackles. You saw it in the Tennessee game, you saw it in the bowl game against NC State, and now that Zach Cunningham's gone, who was really the only sure tackler on this defense, it's starting to manifest itself more and more. And the other aspect is failure to hold the edge. And this one you saw in the long touchdown run by Eric Swinney. Immediately, the entire defense collapses into the middle. Swinney takes darts left immediately and is home free. I mean, you have to be able to hold the edge if you're a defensive end on this team. Otherwise, any offense, even an offense who struggles to run as much as Ole Miss does, is going to be able to run up and down the field on you. And if you can't stop the run, then you can't stop anything. So the problem with this Vanderbilt defense is twofold. It's a lack of effort and a lack of preparation. And the talent's there. They have some good players up front. Nephi Lealau has been one of the best run stoppers in the conference over the past 2 seasons. And simply a lack of talent behind him, or a lack of tackling, or a lack of preparation is what's holding this team back in the long run.
Right, so my point about why this rush defense is struggling so much builds a little bit off of your comment about holding the edge. And I think mine is really the lack of physicality overall just across this defense. And especially when you look at the point of attack. Because by the time that these backs are getting into the secondary, getting to that second and third level, they're running full steam ahead. Like, they're not being slowed down at the line at all. And what that means is that these backs have a lot of one-on-one opportunities, and they're just having their way with a lot of players. And especially one thing I want to point out is when you look at the Shea Patterson touchdown run, like, he ran over Trey Herman. And at the end of the day, you play defense, and that's a quarterback in the open field. You got to make that tackle. You can't let a quarterback carry you for 4 yards into the end zone. Like, that is just unacceptable at a certain point. And it's really tough because a lot of people want to look to the coaches and blame the coaching and say you got to coach them up on wrapping up better and things like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these players are in position to make a play. I mean, they're missing tackles. And as a coach, I'm really not sure what you do at that point, because all you can do is put your players in a position to be as successful as possible. And if the scheme's getting the players in position and they just can't make these tackles or make these plays, or they're getting beat one-on-one, like, it begs to raise the question, like, are we just not good enough, or is it the scheme, or is it something in coaching? And it's a tough question to ask, and I don't have the answer for you.
mean, how much of that is mental, where you're just being a little bit lazy on the line? Because when you're arm tackling some guys that you really can't arm tackle, I mean, there's certain preparation that goes into it. I mean, you have to be able to be fundamentally sound. That's the big red flag here, is that it's not just, it's some scheme that Vanderbilt missed in this game. It's an offensive system they hadn't seen before. It's a lack of preparation in the film room. No, this is the basic fundamental of what you have to do as a defender. When you're a defender in a football game, your main objective is to tackle the person with the ball. And being unable to do that, I mean, is it a mental thing? Is it a thing where they need to kind of get their heads right in this bye week? Or is it more of they need to actually go back to the drawing board and in practice work on the physical fundamental of tackling?
I mean, I don't know exactly where you start, but it looks like you're going to have to go back to the basic fundamentals. Because if you can't tackle, then you have no defense. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in position to make a play if you don't, therefore, go forward and make that play. And Derek Mason was right. After the game, he said every single spot on this defense is up for grabs. And it should be. If you can't make a tackle, maybe the person who's backing you up can make a tackle. Because, I'm sorry, you're not that valuable to this football team if you're not making a formed tackle on defense. You can't be good enough at anything else to make up for that aspect of your game. So it might be going back to the drawing board. It might be giving some guys spots on that defense that maybe haven't had a chance yet. And I guess it is a little bit of a lack of effort. I don't believe that they're going into this football game saying, hey, let's not try our hardest to make these tackles. But they are going in, and when the score starts to snowball like it has and teams are reaching 40, 50 points, at a certain point the defense is saying, you know what, let's give up. Because when you've let 50 points in a game, you're not playing the way you want to. You can't make up for that anymore. So it continues to snowball the way it has. And if that keeps happening, yeah, guys should lose their jobs. People should take over for them. And that's the only way to mitigate this problem in the future.
Right? Like, nobody wants to get run over on defense. But at a certain point, and this rings true because it's the thing that pretty much every high school football coach says at a certain point, you want to be the hammer, not the nail. And looking at these highlights, you see the Vanderbilt defense get nailed on pretty much every significant run play. And that's really, really tough. And when you look at that, and when you look at the lack of physicality at that point of attack, it's almost like maybe you need people in there with more of a sense of urgency, people that are trying to prove their worth and give that little extra effort because they're trying to fight for their job. Maybe that's what's going to push them over the edge.
Would it be a little less of a concern if the defense and Derek Mason's defense weren't kind of the hallmark of this team? Derek Mason acts as the defensive coordinator, even though he is the head coach. This is supposed to be the bread and butter of this team. This is supposed to be where they excel, where they give their offense a chance to be able to win them games. Does that make it all the more concerning that this is supposed to be the bedrock of the team and it's kind of starting to fall apart?
Yeah, of course it does. And the thing you have to understand about Vanderbilt football is Vanderbilt will never be the more talented team on the field when they play in these SEC matchups. Ole Miss is a program that consistently recruits five-star talent. Vanderbilt's not going to do that. And so when you go on the field, you have to make sure you understand the basic fundamentals and you don't make mistakes. And that includes things like form tackling. You can't afford to make mistakes against a team that's frankly more talented than you. And even though Ole Miss hasn't shown it this year, Ole Miss has the talent that Vanderbilt doesn't necessarily have. And so if you're not going to do the mere basics and make these plays, then yeah, that's going to be a problem, especially when you pride yourself on that defense. Derek Mason prides himself on his defensive coaching ability, and he's been so great at it in years past that it really is a problem for this team that it's the hallmark of their roster up and down, and they're not being able to make these plays.
Right, it's really interesting how the script is flipped from the last year. Because last year we were in a lot of really close games, and there was a lot of really, really gritty games that were 1-2 possessions because our defense did keep us anchored, and they made sure that we were in those games. So while we didn't necessarily have the offensive production, we were always within a score or two, and it was always a game. But now we're just seeing these track races where we just can't keep up, and all of a sudden we're down 20, down 30, down 2 or 3 possessions. And at that point, it's just like if the hallmark of your team is letting you down that much, it's tough.
Vanderbilt headed into the bye week this week. No game. Perhaps time to take stock for the team, try to figure out where they're improving. The run game, or run defense, I should say, obviously one of them. But it's also time for us to kind of take stock of where this team was, where this team has been, and where this team should go from here. Vanderbilt 3-4 after starting the year 3-0, and they were looking like they were poised to take a spot in the top 25. Did not turn out like that. Vanderbilt instead losing 4 games in a row, including some pretty tough opponents in Georgia and Alabama. Some opponents that they perhaps should have beaten, like Ole Miss and Florida. But, I mean, at this point, people are starting to say, well, should we start panicking about this team now? Is it time to see is it time to actually hit the panic button? And I'll ask you guys the same question. Are you guys hitting the panic button quite yet on this team?
Yeah, I personally think that it is time to hit the panic button. And I just want to talk about this last 4-game stretch, all this SEC play. Because after we were 3-0, we beat Kansas State. We were on the fringe of going top 25. I think we were ranked 27 or something in that ballpark. We were looking at these 4 games, and we said, hey, if we go 2-2 here, we're in a good spot. We've got 5 wins. We're going to be way ahead of where we were last year. 2-2 is extremely doable. Maybe 3-1. Let's not hold our breath, but that's what we were thinking. We were incredibly optimistic. And now looking back, seeing us come out of this 4-game stretch at 0-4 is just very, very disheartening. And I mean, last year we lost games to teams that we were supposed to beat a good amount, but we also have those hallmark, really gritty games, those hallmark upset wins, and just the way we're playing and the way we're losing right now, I don't see that being the same script that happened last year. I mean, we lost to an Ole Miss team that had previously 2 wins against St. Martin's and South Alabama, UT Martin and South Alabama. I mean, it was just a really, really tough game to lose by that many points and in that fashion. And I think that a real trouble spot on this team that gives me the most concern has got to be that offensive line. Because that offensive line hurts offensive production because it impacts Shermer and Ralph Webb. Last game against Ole Miss, they gave up 7 sacks when they'd given up less than 7 sacks the entire season combined. So that's just really tough. I don't care if you have Tom Brady in the backfield. If you don't have time to throw as a quarterback, you're not going to get that offensive production. And the fact that we still put up 35 points was really surprising. But if you actually have that offensive line play, all of a sudden, maybe it is a horse race, and maybe we are in that game. But giving up 7 sacks is just unacceptable at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, very few coaches are going to hit the panic button after a loss, 3 straight losses to Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. Those are the teams at the top of this conference year in and year out. But when you take into account that those teams scored 59, 38, and 45 points respectively in those games, you might start to hit the panic button a little bit and then say, okay, we have a game against Ole Miss. This is where we can make it up. Ole Miss is a team that's frankly inferior. They had only had 2 wins. Neither were great wins coming into this game. And then Ole Miss puts up 57, and yeah, you're all over that panic button because you can't keep affording to give up 50-plus points. It doesn't matter how good your offense is. You're not going to win a game where you give up 57 points, especially to a team like Ole Miss that hasn't had success in this conference. So when you're looking up and down this conference, earlier in the season, Vanderbilt thought, hey, maybe we can contend for the East. Now they're losing to the cellar dwellers of the West, and you can't continue to lose those games and still compete in this conference. So if you want to move up, and that's every coach's objective going from one season to the next, just be better than you were last year, and that was this team's goal. You can't afford to lose games like this. So when you go into a 4-game losing stretch, the latter of which is coming off a terrible loss to a team that's much worse, of course you're going to be hitting the panic button. And the problem isn't just the run game. In this game, Shea Patterson lets up 351 yards and 4 touchdowns. The passing game's not there, and you saw part of it from a lack of preparation. When you look at that play in the second quarter, where DeMarcus Lodge's touchdown, let's cue that play up for a second. Starts out, this is a cover 2 defense with Zaire Jones and Ladarius Wiley, the deep safeties. Jones is on the far side of the screen. He's responsible for everything in the end zone. And watch him on the start of this play as Patterson takes the snap. He immediately crashes towards the line of scrimmage. And when you look at this defensive formation right here, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defenders between the 30 and the 35-yard line with only 1 receiver in the vicinity. And now Joan Williams, the corner on the top of the screen, he does his job. He takes the sideline route, but he's expecting that help over the top. So he passed, and DeMarcus Lodge is wide open. He passes that receiver off to what he thinks is Zaire Jones, and Jones simply isn't there. So it's this lack of preparation, this communication on defense where you don't have a guy doing his basic job as a safety, and you have 5 guys who are all in the middle of the field, 4 of which seem out of position. So if you're not going to be able to defend the run or the pass, and your defense is going to put up this many points, it's really hard to win football games.
How much do you think having the bye week now, I mean, it feels like there's no more opportune time to have a bye week than after that kind of game where you have a couple extra days to be able to figure some things out. On the other hand, is it going to do any good? Because it seems like the issues are so fundamental and mental that an extra week might not do you much good.
Right? It almost feels like in a basketball game when a coach calls a timeout to stop a run that another team is going on. Like, that is Vanderbilt's season at this point. Because when you look at where we are as a team, we're 3-4 right now. That's exactly where we were 7 games into the season last year. But we started the season 1-2 last year, and we started the season 3-0 this year. And there are so many expectations around this team. So I think this bye week is going to be very crucial to almost hit the reset button and be like, we're better than this. We have played better than this. So let's just get back to what we're good at. Let's actually try and play some basic football. I mean, just like the play that you were talking about, Max, do your job. It's just like very fundamental things that need to be preached, and I'm sure they are, but they just need to find people that are willing to listen.
Yeah, this is the opportune time to have a bye week because they have so much that they have to fix on both sides of the ball and just not enough time week to week to fix these problems. As we've seen, the past 4 weeks, they haven't been able to fix a single one of them. So maybe it is the best time to have a bye week. And 2 weeks down the road, you're facing what's going to be the toughest team you face for the rest of the season in South Carolina. This is a team that's 4-2. They're red hot. They look great. Vanderbilt's not going to be – they're going to be a heavy underdog in this game. So they need time to regroup. They need to figure some stuff out because they're going to come out of this bye week and be facing a tough South Carolina team that's also coming out of the bye week. So this is a big matchup for them, and they need to be hitting on all cylinders in order to defeat this team.
What also has me thinking is when Derek Mason says that every spot is up for grabs, I think having this 2-week period to tinker with the roster and to play with the depth chart, I think that team is going to be key, especially for that adjustment if that's something that they are serious about looking into.
That's certainly a good sign that they recognize that there are problems to be fixed, and they need to be fixed in the sense that players might need to come out of the lineup and new blood needs to be inserted there. I mean, looking at Vanderbilt's opponents the rest of the year, they got South Carolina, they've got Western Kentucky, Mizzou, and Tennessee. There are 3 winnable games in that stretch for sure. So looking at it realistically, there's still a good chance Vanderbilt is able to make it to a bowl game. And I think that was not the goal this season. That was kind of the minimum expectation for what could possibly be construed as a successful season. But if these things continue and they don't make it to a bowl game, how bad of a look would that be for this Mason team that was supposed to be this ever improved team that was supposed to be so much better than they were last year, and then they're going to be graduating a whole bunch of guys?
I was like, progress is always the hallmark of programs like Vanderbilt, especially with Derek Mason, who's not a new head coach by any means, but still very much trying to get this team off the ground, trying to establish their place in the SEC. And when you're looking at progress, going backwards is always unacceptable in situations like this. So you have to meet that bare minimum, and if you don't, that's just such a tough look.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team of upperclassmen. You want to be able to get to that next level, especially to get back to that bowl game. I mean, if you told this team that you were going to start the season 3-0 after beating Kansas State and still not make a bowl game, that shows an awful effort on the back half of the schedule. So it would be really upsetting for this program if they couldn't make a bowl game.
What's also tough is that this back half of the schedule was slated as the easy half. All right, we're out of all the tough games. We have the winnable games. But after Ole Miss, it's like, can you really call any game winnable?
Exactly. And we will see more from Vanderbilt next Saturday against South Carolina on the road in Columbia. Moving on, finally, to the basketball court. Well, sort of. Matthew Fisher-Davis, one of Vanderbilt's best offensive players, on Sunday put out a video on Twitter, a very well-produced and powerful video, about basically responding to the criticisms he faced after his foul again in the NCAA tournament against Northwestern. We have that video for you in its entirety, and let's roll it.
Northwestern does have a timeout, and Fisher-Davis fouls McIntosh. He had no idea. He had no idea. He actually just pointed to his head. I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. He thought either they were down, or he thought they were down, or he thought they...
Everybody had something to say. He killed my bracket. He doesn't care. He's not a team player. He has a bad attitude. He's selfish. He doesn't work hard. He has bad character. Everybody had something to say. Now listen to me.
Incredible stuff there from Fisher-Davis. You could tell he's been pretty resilient through this whole thing because he faced a lot. That was probably one of the iconic moments of the tournament, and not for a good reason for him. So he acknowledges that he messed up. He acknowledges what happened, but he also acknowledges everything that he's faced since then. Are you expecting some big things from Matthew Fisher-Davis this season?
I am, and you kind of have to if you're rooting for this Vanderbilt program to succeed. Fisher-Davis is an exceptional offensive player. I mean, let's not forget that before this bonehead play at the end of the Northwestern game, he was carrying this offense throughout the game, hitting one big shot after another. I mean, throughout the season, he was the team's leading scorer, faced a little scrutiny after he apparently missed a team practice or a team bus. I don't remember, but he missed the Arkansas game for that. He was suspended for the one game, and then came back and found himself coming off the bench, only to come back later in that season and pick up right where he left off, scoring the basketball. So he's faced a lot of scrutiny from both coaches, from fans, from the media, and now he's coming back into this season with a different mindset, saying, I don't care what everyone's saying about me, I can lead this team and I can continue to produce the way I have in years past. And I look for Matthew Fisher-Davis to be the leader of this team this season. I mean, he's a guy who can put up 20 points on any given night, might average 20 points a game this season, and he's a high-volume shooter. He'll be able to get a lot more shots up and not have to create everything off the dribble now that Riley LaChance is playing off the ball a little more. So you expect big things out of Matthew Fisher-Davis both on the court and a little bit in the locker room. He's a senior now. He understands that he has to have that level of accountability. You saw it there in that video. He cares. He unquestionably cares about this team. That's another criticism of him. So you really saw him address that and also expecting big things on the court for him this season, and you kind of have to.
Right, we were talking before the show, and this video seemed very Kevin Durant-esque, talking about criticism, the criticism that one has faced. The only difference is Kevin Durant released that video and that ad line after he won a championship, and this is before a season. So with that in mind, I want to preface this by saying a video is a video and talk is talk. No matter how well produced, like, this is still talk before a season. But I think that the way I want to take this interpretation about what I expect from Matthew Fisher-Davis is a lot about character, because he directly stated all these criticisms that he's been facing for a while. Everything that people like us have been saying, and he just meets it head on. Bad attitude, not a team player, doesn't care. So I think that recognizing that those are the vibes and those are the thoughts around you is a very, very key first step. Because what he showed in this video is a lot of resilience and a lot of willingness to want to leave his mark on Vanderbilt, on this program. And we really don't see a lot of personality from Matt Fisher-Davis on the court because that's just the way he plays. And being able to see this video, this little snapshot into his mentality, I think that's huge. And at least from what this video has shown us, I think he's got the exact perfect mentality going into the season. But again, this is just talk, and we'll wait and see, but I think it's a good start.
For Vanderbilt, kind of flipping the script here, do they need Matthew Fisher-Davis to step up this season? Because they're missing Luke Cornett down low. He's a big guy who's athletic but can also shoot from outside. And I mean, who knows what their down low presence is going to look like this year. They have Jerry Baptiste, but who knows what that kind of could look like. So they need to mitigate that by having guys like Fisher-Davis step up around the perimeter and with the jump shot.
Yeah, absolutely they need Matthew Fisher-Davis this season. He's flat out their best scorer. And this is an offense that a lot of times you see them bring up the ball and simply pass it around the perimeter and settle for a deep three-point shot with a couple seconds left in the shot clock. Matthew Fisher-Davis can legitimately create his own shot, which is not something you can say about many guys on this roster, and he can do it routinely. He doesn't need a lot of space to get that shot off, and he shoots it at an extremely high clip. So they need Matthew Fisher-Davis to take that next step up to fill that void, not necessarily the same exact kind of void that Cornett left, but Cornett left a lot of things when he left this school. He left leadership, he left scoring the basketball, rebounding. Some of that's going to be picked up by the big men, but a lot of that has to be picked up by Matthew Fisher-Davis, who looks like he might be the leader and best player on this team coming up.
Right, I think, if I remember right, our favorite phrase last year was live and die by the three. And the only reason that Vanderbilt wasn't that Northwestern game was because Matthew Fisher-Davis was hitting incredibly tough contested shots from behind the arc. And what's really interesting is when you look at a lot of traditional basketball thought, a lot of it is get dribble penetration into the lane that'll free up people on the outside, and that's how you get a really good flow going. But especially with the uncertainty down low and in the post and with our big men, I think what might have to happen is have a really consistent shot from outside, have defenders have to run up to the line, and that can create passing lanes to make the job easier for your big men down low. So with that in mind, and if that is the tone of this Vanderbilt team, again, we'll have to wait and see how the season plays out. I think that his 3-point proficiency and his actual scoring efficiency is going to be huge for the rest of this team.
And we'll have plenty more basketball coverage coming up as the season gets closer. November 10th, I believe, is the opener for the Commodores. With that, that'll just about do it for this week's episode of VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed some good football bye-week content. From Max Schneider and Drew Sundaram, I am Cutler Klein, saying so long, and we will see you next time.